Somebody left a comment saying that I was apparently possessed by demons because I wear sunglasses. I don't even know what to say to these people at this point. Anyways, Nameless Narcissist here once again. A simple man diagnosed with NPD, talking about stigma, trying to give you some insight about how my head works. Keep in mind, I'm no clinician, so take whatever I say with a grain of salt. But hopefully you'll find some insight. And please like, comment, and subscribe if you do. And if you don't, still do that anyway. What's the harm? Please help me out. Anyways, so we're going to be talking about a sensitive topic today for us cluster Bs, suicidality. Which is, it's very funny to me when I talk about this because of how normalized the idea of suicide is in my head at this point in my life. And I feel this is probably similar for a lot of people with cluster Bs, of just suicide is something you kind of want to do a lot. But not like in a serious way. It's kind of like, I kind of wish I was dead, oh well. Nothing that you would actually act on 90% of the time, but then there's your capricious moments where you do act on it. And I came across this study that shows that I'm going to have to link this study 100% before I even post this video, because I don't think people will believe me if I don't. So the number 3 cause of death was cancer at around 18%. Number 2 cause of death was cardiovascular disease at 19.6, I think. This cardiovascular disease is actually something that people with personality disorders that are a higher risk of, so that probably also contributes to the cluster B mortality rate. But number 1, the leading cause of death in cluster B patients with borderline and narcissistic personality disorder, leading the charge in this case, 20.4% of people with these disorders, at least in this study done in Quebec of 8 million people, die of suicide. 1 in 5 people with a cluster B die of suicide. Let that sink in, that these disorders that are constantly stigmatized, people are constantly looking down on and talking shit about, saying that we're all abusers, we die of suicide at a rate that is more prominent than cancer and cardiovascular disease. It's our number 1 leading cause of death. I had no idea it was that high, if I'm being honest. I thought it was closer to I thought it was going to be closer to 1 in 10, tops, and even that would be insane. Imagine any other disease that had a mortality rate that high. And again, that's just how much of that cardiovascular disease was also contributed by the fact that they had a cluster B disorder. But any other disorder had a 1 in 5 mortality rate, it would be top priority. Imagine if COVID had a 1 in 5 mortality rate, things would have been insane. But instead, we are blamed for our disorders and we are stigmatized horribly for them. It really shows how this really highlighted to me the importance of sharing the true nature of these disorders and how we do need more ways to be able to heal from them and to treat them and stuff like that. Because aside from the damage that they cause other people and stuff, we're killing ourselves real fucking fast. Holy crap. I'm kind of going on about it a little bit, but it's hard to even wrap your mind around that statistic. Let's say it tracks with in regards to my family at least, Jesus Christ. But yeah, it's really, really not good. It's not. And it's ignored a lot, and I even don't really like talking about it because again, I don't like being seen as victim. These disorders cause a lot of suffering for people that have them, regardless of the fact if they're hurting other people, which not all of us do. That alone should be enough. The fact that I have to go and that I have to point out that hey, a good way to prevent people with these traits from hurting other people is to go to treatment. The fact that I have to say that to justify my message instead of the fact that we are killing ourselves real quick really speaks to how much progress has to be done in regards to kind of demystifying this stuff. And hence why I have no regrets about talking shit about HG Tutor, and I'll do it again. Anyways, another thing I want to talk about though was another study that I read. It was a case study of 3 young individuals, all had either full-blown NPD or NPD traits. I think only one of them didn't have the full-blown diagnosis. And their suicide attempts and how those panned out. So it was Mr. A, Mr. B, Mr. C. Mr. A was he must have some BPD stuff going on because so basically he was sleeping with some girl and she kind of gave him like promises like, oh yeah, I'm gonna leave my, because she was dating some other dude. She's like, oh, I'm gonna leave my lover, and you know, we can be together, blah blah blah, and kind of implying stuff like that. But then she told him that she was going to marry some other guy, and the dude was like not happy about it, and so he did a very manipulative thing, which I do not approve of whatsoever. But he basically left a note where he thought she'd find it fast, and then went and hung himself in the other room in the hopes that she would like come and like save him. Whether he actually thought that or not, I'll get to later. But interestingly enough, he expressed this strong wish to be saved from a suicide because apparently when he was a kid, he had to save his dad a couple times from suicide. So kind of fun family, right? Jesus. No, the second, and that first guy is the only guy who didn't have like 5 of the criteria for NPD. I'm pretty sure I had 4. Second guy, he was an art student, and he was allegedly, and he was like brought in because he hung himself. Common theme. It was told that, so basically he told them that, oh, I didn't actually want to die. I was just doing this art project about death and stuff like that. But when you actually, but like going over his stuff, you saw that one, like his psychotherapist had terminated treatment with him. A bunch of his friends were moving away. He had stopped group therapy on his own accord. A couple other things. He had a lot of stuff going on in his life. And he swore up and down. He's like, nope, I just did this for art. And again, he met the full criteria of MBD, and he was very annoyed that this was happening. Because it's like, oh, it wasn't that serious. It's like, oh, it was just an art thing. Like, why is everybody taking this so seriously? But then later on, he did admit that he was always curious about the intermediate between life and death, weirdly enough. Then the third guy was not psychology. I think he was a philosophy student or something like that. And he took amounts of cyanide because he said that he had no intentions of dying, didn't want to die, but he wanted to experience as close to death as he could as a philosophical quandary, basically. Like, you know, what is death? What does it feel like? Stuff like that, you know. But apparently he was like imitating something that his dad did or some shit like that. It was wild. And this guy actually took this cyanide right before he was supposed to have a dinner with his, I think she had dementia and stuff, and they didn't have a good relationship. And apparently it caused him a lot of emotional distress right before he would ever go to, like, whenever he'd be around her, like, he'd be upset, obviously. And he tried to do that right before. So he also denied having any intent to kill himself. And you hear that, and even me, when I was reading this, I was like, oh, like, that first guy just said, I thought that he was actually being genuine. I can't tell for sure, though. It's hard to say. But then the other 2 guys, it's like, okay, they're just kind of lying to try to, like, get rid of the blame. But then I started thinking back when I went to inpatient you know. And I remember how I reacted to it in the moment, because I was really annoyed at having to go to inpatient. I was like, what a waste of time. It was a terrible place in my defense. And I remember the doctor there talking to me and saying, like, this is like really serious. You could have died. And I was like, but I didn't. It's like, why is this such a big deal? I didn't die. I was emotional and capricious, and I slipped up. Whatever. Who cares? And they discharged me for refusing treatment. No, I'm a well-adjusted person, I swear. But like in the moment, that was very, especially like in that moment, I was very like, oh yeah, like that's the truth. Like it's not that big of a deal. Like, yeah, I tried to kill myself, but it was like a one-time thing. I was emotional over something. It was just a moment of capri, and you know, I'm fine. Like, who cares? Let me go. And looking back on it, I can kind of see how, like, yeah, I guess like it would be kind of worrying, even if that was just a capricious moment for me, that a capricious moment could lead to a suicide attempt, but, you know, whatever. Interesting enough, they also mentioned this, that, like, they also, like, none of them could identify any of the emotions with loss and stuff in relation to this. But another reason I think that these guys probably were being genuine when they said they had no suicidal, or at least they thought they had no suicidal intentions, because I think it was like the defensive grandiosity. It's like, oh no, like I don't need help or anything. Like, I'm fine. Like, why are you guys bothering me? Something I very frequently notice is how hard it is for me to tie when I have an emotional reaction to something. Like even things like getting enough sleep or eating properly. I can't tell if one of those things is causing some mood dysregulation with me. Or like once, as an extreme example, I had a buddy of mine who shot himself. And I didn't feel anything when he died. I was like, okay. And I was at the funeral and like I was just like very cautious. I was like, oh man, people don't want to tell that I don't feel anything. This is stressful. But a very interesting thing happened later is like later in the night I got uncharacteristically drunk. Like I just and like it wasn't like, oh, I'm so sad I need to drown this. It was just like me being like not even thinking about it. I'm just drinking. And I completely break down and like I have like this big moment and I can't I couldn't even tie it to the fact that my friend killed himself in that moment. Eventually it was kind of obvious that, oh yeah, that's probably what caused it. But for me to be able to identify when I have a huge emotional like outburst to what the actual issue is almost impossible, because since I have such a hard time identifying what my emotions are, I'm not seeing how they affect me until way after, and I can kind of look at it in post. And this is a theme I see with a couple other people who, one other guy in particular that I know that has NPD. I haven't talked about this portion of it too much because it's very confusing. But like when I'm having like an outburst at somebody, and you know someone's like, oh, like trying to figure out why, it does make communication about why very difficult, because it's like I don't even know, like genuinely. I'm so disconnected from my emotions like that it's like I'll never know what's just me and what's just a reaction. So in this case, I think that they had these emotional distressing things that they couldn't consciously recognize were distressing to them, and they basically rationalized a suicide attempt as not being suicidal, which is really interesting. And it honestly makes me look back on my life and think, man, how many times was I like closer to suicide than I thought, and I've just convinced myself otherwise. The deceptive nature of NPD, the self-deceptive nature of NPD is terrifying when I look at it like that, and shows why some of these suicide rates are so high. It's like I am denying completely up until that point that there's anything wrong, and then because I genuinely think nothing's wrong, and then like, you know, you survive or you don't. And it's like, how do you spot that? And I feel like if we had better tools with helping and treating NPD, then maybe, you know, we could spot that easier. But yeah, I read that and I just had to make a video about it because it was like, it was shocking. The severity of these conditions, I think, is so underestimated with people without them, because to the outsider, it just looks like we're assholes or dramatic, erratic, and, you know, unpredictable. When they don't realize it, like, it's not our responses to these things that are disproportionate. Our responses to it's our emotional distress that is disproportionate. Our reactions to it is completely in line with how we feel in the moment, which is part of the issue. And I feel like just because our symptoms don't manifest in a way that is obviously impairing or obviously like abnormal, I guess, not even that. There's like a difference between, you know, like schizophrenic symptoms and cluster B symptoms in that way, you know. Like one of them you can very obviously identify, like, okay, this is like not supposed to be happening, like they can't help this. Or with us, since it's so much of that is emotional and identity driven, our symptoms manifest as normal behaviors, normal in quote behaviors that are over the top. When again, to us, they're just not. I don't like, we wouldn't do these things if they were like over the top, you know what I mean? I hope that makes sense. Not to say that any of these behaviors that we do are justified, but to say that there's a reason that we do it, and that reason is a lot of subjective distress. Anyways, thank you all for watching. Hope you learned something. Hope I made this a little bit lighter than like would be expected, but whatever. Anyways, hope you all have a good day, and take your fucking meds.